Two human trafficking flicks, Alejandro Monteverdi's 2023 Sound of Freedom and Nick Cassavetes' 2023 God is a Bullet. Sound of Freedom opened to the sound of... along with all the press coverage, political friction, and conspiracy theories can spark. It ended up in the year's top 10 for domestic box office gross, outperforming Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and the New York Times has it as one of history's most successful independent films. Yet only 12 days prior, God is a Bullet, a very similar quote-unquote based on a true story narrative about a Jesus-loving white conservative American giving up his job in law enforcement to follow a child kidnapped into sexual slavery, infiltrating the community of pedophiles responsible at whatever risk and toll the job demands, opened and closed at a limited number of theaters without so much as the sound of a whimper. Sound of Freedom seeks to canonize the story of real-life Tim Ballard and his Operation Underground Railroad, maximizing every cent of its $14.5 million budget and tugging you by the heartstrings to the altar of hero worship. God is a Bullet takes an unverifiable true story by an author who doesn't actually exist and squeezes the cinematic juice out of every exploitative grindhouse angle. For all 155 minutes of the runtime, God is a Bullet takes the low road. The violence is over the top, the dialogue is edgelord poetry, the story beats and character choices are loud and crass. It promises entertainment rather than enlightenment, and paradoxically, it's also the more honest film. A woman shows up at hardworking father Roberto Aguilar's door promising the answer to every dad's dreams: child modeling contracts for his kids. This turns out to be a ruse, and when Roberto goes to pick up his kids from their first day of modeling, they're gone baby gone. But luckily for Roberto, over in the States, Fed Tim Ballard is fed up with not being able to reach his arms through his computer screen to strangle the lowlifes responsible for such crimes, and also recover the victimized kids from lands not under the auspices of Old Glory. When brother Miguel is returned to Roberto, but not sister Rocio, Ballard leaves the homeland to give chase. Sound of Freedom was only really ever relevant as a political football. The film was designed as fodder to reinforce a belief that the imagined ticket buyer likely already had, that there exists an underground network of global elites that prey upon children for sexual exploitation and abuse. Certainly, in 2025, no one is saying that this could not in any way be based on things that are actually taking place, but Angel Studios' previous projects and the marketing lead up to the film, with lead actor Jim Caviezel's public comments in particular, nudged the film firmly to one side of the culture war. Angel Studios certainly did nothing to dissuade receptive audiences from the perception that this film would serve as testament to those beliefs. In reaction to a competing political viewpoint entering the arena of liberal Hollywood, mainstream movie coverage denounced Sound of Freedom prior to release and implored audiences not to see it, which of course achieved the opposite result. The inner monologue for the average filmgoer went something like this: "The mainstream media doesn't want me to see this film. I'm a free thinker. I'll go see it and make up my mind for myself. Hope no one sees me walking in and gets the wrong idea." And when this free-thinking schlub sat down and saw the opening camera move and bang for your buck cinematography, they probably thought, well, it looks pretty good, Caviezel's performance is pretty good, and the child actors, they're pretty good, they really hook you emotionally. They were ready to take sides against manufactured mainstream opinion. The film then progresses to tightrope walk, refusing to offend the left or entirely abandon its core audience, lobbing inoffensive, vaguely Christian platitudes like God's children are not for sale, as Caviezel's Ballard fights the one-dimensional, totally predictable good fight, and weirdly enough, these free-thinker audience members were relieved. Relieved the Second American Civil War wasn't going to kick off in their 3 p.m. Monday matinee. In my opinion, their collective exhales were mistaken as positive word of mouth, both by themselves and others, and are partially responsible in propelling the film to a lucrative theatrical run. The film even holds a 3.3 on Letterboxd, a site I'm assuming has a user base that's predisposed to be disapproving of the latest and greatest from Angel Studios. This is bullshit. Sure, it's shot well for the money. Aspiring cinematographers working with a low budget can learn a trick or two from Monteverde and Gorka Gomez Andreu, namely how to utilize natural lighting, central compositions, and easy-to-control, largely neutral color schemes, with an outlier color for pop and emphasis, to create a feel of production value. The opening sequence features all these tricks and more, a trick camera move, an exotic location for the targeted American audience, and creates a first impression of visual quality that persists, even though that sense of production value declines over the course of the runtime, and never achieves a truly standout, memorable image. The acting is also effective. The kids they cast really make the film watchable to the extent that it is. While it's cheap to use terrible things happening to kids for emotional buy-in, the subject matter kind of demands it, and the kids acting in these scenes really earn it, despite their characterizations being as complex as a McDonald's Happy Meal order. Boy kid gets boy toy, girl kid gets girl toy. These are their entire personalities. The film has no interest in exploring the damage done to these kids or expressing these characters as anything other than cherubic lambs. Great casting though. Caviezel can also cast a pregnant, weighty gaze as good as anybody. Otherwise, Sound of Freedom is cinematically bankrupt. It never turns the emotional currency it generates into art. It teases a secret world it's going to expose, but never really delivers. There's some lingo. Kids are referred to as chickens in one scene, and then apparently pedophiles use the term pedo action when attempting to procure victims, but nothing that really gives you the sense that the screenplay is actually informed about these kind of groups. The pedophiles themselves are cartoons. Dave Franco's unfuckable hipster brother who arranges his child pornography like rare concert bootlegs in his mom's attic, and a Hispanic man who wears eye makeup. They might as well be twirling their mustaches and running off to tie people to railroad tracks. The film almost veers into a heist-style plot with the planning of the island party to lure in the pedophiles and recover the kids, but it unfolds undramatically. Again, there's an absence of detail in the setup that prevents us from getting invested, an absence of variables to create tension, and therefore an absence of satisfaction when the plan is more or less immediately implemented and carried out. This is where the seams of the budget really begin tearing. The island party for global elites has all the liveliness of a mandatory corporate bonding exercise. It's like 4 dudes sharing a 6-pack of Corona. No Alex Jones storming Bohemian Grove shenanigans here. Then the film tries to veer in the direction of being a Journey Down the River, Heart of Darkness style action thriller. We get one half-assed fist fight. That's the payoff. Maybe you're saying it's a true story. They didn't want to Hollywood it up and turn it into an Arnold Schwarzenegger vehicle. First off, they absolutely would if they could. Secondly, we don't need explosions and car chases. How about we see the strain on Ballard's family? Even if the movie's version of events is how it happened 100%, and Mrs. Ballard was totally behind Tim leaving his family and job for an indeterminate period of time to chase down these kids overseas, can I get a little dramatization? Can I get a sense of the sacrifice that entails and why someone would do it? Even meaningful dialogue is replaced by slogans a la God's children are not for sale. Third, why go through the trouble of staging all this if you weren't going to play it for drama? If you were going for a very straightforward, literal retelling of Ballard's operation, well, there's a documentary on that. Ultimately, the answer to these questions is that telling a story isn't really what the filmmakers were after. It's creating an emotionally manipulated state in the audience for Caviezel's closing grift to be the most effective. Turns out someone needs to pay for human trafficking, and plot twist, it's you. Again. Caviezel goes full stop Coney over the credits and suggests that if the scenes depicting children who suffered horrible atrocities affected you, you should do something about it. And the best thing you could do about it is buy another ticket. Not even like donate to fund Ballard's future operations or a charity that helps these kids, but buy more tickets to a film he clearly is financially benefiting from to, quote, get the word out. This just in, human trafficking is bad. Breaking news, raping kids is wrong. Don't do it. I'm sorry, but using the human trafficking of children as an emotional lever to pull in an attempt to get people to line your pockets and convince everybody involved that they're somehow doing something to help these kids, very un-Christ-like. It's the kind of thing that makes everybody involved in the project look like a charlatan, including Ballard, who is portrayed like a real-life superhero, is being played by an actor who is known for playing Jesus Christ, and is now the target of much mudslinging in real life for alleged serious personal misconduct. That's largely outside of the scope of this video. Do your own research. I'm surprised they didn't send representatives theater to pass out collection baskets. Angel Studios' website solicits donations via its Pay It Forward system, which is still operational and claims it will enable more people to see the film by making it, quote, available for general public streaming. Despite the film's overwhelming success and over $26 million donated through this system, that's taken from an article from IndieWire, it isn't streaming for free on Angel's site. You have to pay for a membership or stream it on Amazon Prime as of filming. It's clear to me the film was made because the subject matter is emotionally triggering. Angel Studios then wafts a kind of vague, non-denominational scent of Christianity over the proceedings to inspire charity from the so inclined, sprinkles some shots of the American flag and release it on the 4th of July to entice people's patriotism, and then suggests that a donation to Angel Studios would somehow help kids in these terrible situations via money going towards funding more projects from them down the line. They think this makes the world a better place. Amplifying light is the term they use. I disagree. From the guy who brought you The Notebook comes the film trying to be the most nihilistic, blood-soaked, sexually violent, tattooed, edgiest edgelord film of the year, where Sound of Freedom uses the depravity of depicted crimes as a call to righteousness and tithe. God is a Bullet uses them as if to declare, we don't have the star power or marketing of other movies, but we go places they won't. And Jim Caviezel, bless him for that. A drunk January Jones berates her husband for his impotence, tries to emasculate him by needling him over his gay porn use and past history with pegging, and gets punched in the face. A satanic cult tries to kill the main character by leaving a poisonous snake in his car, which bites him like 6 times before he shoots it with his gun. He's then taken to aggressively vitiligoed, one-handed tattoo artist, fortune teller, not made man of Satan, but good fellow of Satan, Jamie Foxx, to be healed. This film sends it. Divorced dad Bob wakes up Christmas morning and runs down the stairs to find a Manson family murder under the tree. Only Santa blew it, and instead of just taking out the ex-wife's new boyfriend, the cult responsible viciously murdered his baby mama and kidnapped his daughter. With no leads, Bob opts to take an ex-junkie, ex-cult member head case at her word, following her into the night in search of the devil-worshipping cult she just finished escaping from, who she says took Bob's daughter the same way they took her some 20 years ago. Now, full disclosure, I'm a patient brain, and this story stretches out in front of you like the hopeless desert landscape Bob and Case set out upon. It is long. It also doesn't have the peaks and valleys of a more conventionally constructed screenplay, making you feel every minute of the 2.5-hour runtime. I saw the film in theaters and quite a few people got up and walked out halfway through the movie. A lot of the potential drama is undermined by Cassavetes giving us too much information. We know Case is telling us the truth and acting in the best interests of Bob and his daughter from the time we spend in her narrative POV early in the film. We get a lot of backstory in the January Jones subplot, which is just completely not necessary. It's unconnected entirely from the main thrust of the movie and only reattaches at the end of the film, really only to explain one character action. I have the suspicion the audience would be better served by just limiting us to Bob's perspective and what Bob knows. That way Bob's leap into the underworld isn't robbed of its uncertainty, and his character isn't robbed of the degree of his one true virtue, his willingness to do anything to get to his daughter, including following Micah Monroe's Case, who every other character sees as a junkie just looking to get back with her old crew, or take advantage of Bob's desperation. I'd have liked that precariousness fully intact in the first half of the second act. Nothing would help keep people in their seats more than the question of, oh God, is this really going to help him find his daughter? Popping into their heads midway through Barbarino's new face tattoo. It's more exciting to not know and then live vicariously with Bob racing into the darkness, not knowing if the road keeps going or goes where Case says it does. To pity Bob as his neighbors do, to distrust Case, with Bob hoping against reason, and then to discover Case fully, to gradually expand past the limitations of either character's belief systems and subjective experience. But everything here's got kick. You could see why Cassavetes could hesitate, scissors in hand, and while it works against him in a 2.5-hour film, you could see the approach working in an 8-hour season of True Detective. We get the long stretch of Bad Road version, and I still like that ride. Early in the film, Coster Waldau's Bob Hightower remarks, "We live in a small Christian community. We don't have much in the way of deviant behavior." This juxtaposes nicely with one of his later lines. Regarding his ex-wife's new husband, Bob says, "I thought she married him because he was black. Thinking about that says an awful lot about who I am." Unlike Superman Tim Ballard, Bob's kind of an idiot, a desk cowboy of a cop as his superior refers to him as. He's a real wonderbread asshole, ignorant of how fortunate and maybe undeserving of the life he's been gifted, ignorant of how cruel the world and his God can be. But he's a well-meaning idiot, and when Micah Monroe's headcase sees how much he'll risk to find his daughter, physically, mentally, socially, spiritually, she resigns herself to throwing old Bob over her shoulder and carrying him across a hellscape she knows too well. And on said journey, Bob has a lot of time to think about himself and verbally spar with Case about God, the devil, and everything in between. He comes to be reformed from his cult-like faith much in the way Headcase was reformed from hers, painfully. But Case walks away with something from her time spent hauling Bob's ass all over too, a restored faith in a parent that would go to any length to find their kid. Hope. Whereas Sound of Freedom's sordid underbelly is a little beige for my liking, Cassavetes' pedos are rock and roll. Explicitly satanic, they're mystical. They consult the I Ching and walk the left-hand path. They live a nomadic lifestyle filled with drugs, drinking, debauchery. They use jargon like, you're crossing over when someone dies. They don't kill someone, they cross them. Things are gothic. Bob isn't Case's sugar daddy, he's her platinum card. The supporting actors in Cyrus's cult are all fantastic. Ethan Suplee is so cozy in this role, we should all be a little alarmed. They have names like Gutter, Granny Boy, the Ferryman. Jonathan Tucker as Errol steals every scene he's in. Anytime any of these characters are on screen, they demand your attention. The costuming, makeup, and performance for each radiating the sense each has lived their own fully fleshed out and fucked up lives. Where the audience knows too much at the outset of the story, too little is to be gleaned of the satanic cult at the end of the rainbow. Maybe Cassavetes even exhausted himself with story detail at this point in the runtime. We never understand how or why anybody chooses to live the left-hand path, or believes in Cyrus. Cyrus is somehow the one character from Case's past that has any explicit backstory shown in the film, while also being the member of the left-hand path with the least sauce. His charisma is implied, but the audience never feels it. The cult never gains the power over us it should. The film teases this in two main ways. With Case's narrow escape both physically and psychologically, and a scene where Bob gets shot by a flare gun, and a cult member seemingly appears out of thin air. There needs to be a greater supernatural element suggested by the cult. We need to question if Cyrus really does have some kind of mystical black magic. If the cult really is in league with the devil and he's granting them powers. Ultimately, this would be discredited at the end of the film, the result of drugs and trauma, but I want the myths, the rumors of impossible dark deeds, of Cyrus's unnatural hold over people. Cassavetes turns a sober lens on all the proceedings here, again never allowing us to doubt, to dip into the illusion and succumb to the left-hand path, only if to experience coming out the other end a survivor like Case. Nikolai Coster-Waldau's performance is stoic, earnest, and believable for an everyday action hero sort of role, even if his looks are a little too chiseled in my opinion for this kind of movie. Micah Monroe carries the vibes for the leading duo. Opposite Coster-Waldau's square desk cowboy Bob, she's cerebral, cynical, worldly, browbeating Bob for his, in her words, sheep philosophies and flipping the switch to aggressive and wild as the situation and her background in a kill-crazy cult would demand. She carries herself in a believably violent manner, even if the athleticism necessary for some of her murder feats towards the end of the film would be more fitting for Tom Cruise. I'm sure she's rounded out her fair share of Pinterest boards with her look in this one too. The film's got some style, violence is evocative, sudden, and decisive. The final stand in the quarry stands out as a memorable action set piece. There are some slick needle drops, Case's crash out in the market in particular. It's a little too glitzy in presentation to be a bona fide exploitation film. The film isn't dishing out cheap thrills either, it believes in what it has to say. It isn't just using the story as an excuse to stage action sequences. Cassavetes never shoots scenes of sexual violence in a manner to titillate. It's definitely one of the more artistically minded B-action movies you're likely to see. If you've got the patience, there's much more to discover here than the film's footprint would have you believe. So extremely similar plots and subject matters released 12 days apart, and yet two different films with two different approaches. But what is also interesting to me, their juxtaposition really sheds a light on why and for what the general audience is buying a movie ticket for. Relevancy. The idea that a work is culturally significant is a powerful marketing tool. There's the water cooler effect, sure, but even more than that, buying a ticket and watching Sound of Freedom made you educated on a hot topic, on the news, on social media, and now you can cast judgment or feel talking points about it over dinner. This is why studios re-release Oscar-nominated films each year prior to the ceremony, and why films campaign so fiercely to get nominated. By making them relevant in the context of a socially significant event, people are more likely to see any nominee regardless of specific content, even turning initially unsuccessful films into successful ones. People will go to see a film they never would consider otherwise solely because it got nominated. In the case of Sound of Freedom, a controversial studio put out a controversial true story narrative with a controversial lead actor about a controversial real-life personality. Again, do your own research. And people bought a ticket for every reason other than what was actually on their screen. They were gathering evidence for arguments existing off-frame, exclusively out of the work itself. It's more notable for what's not in the film, that Monteverde pumped the brakes before getting into adrenochrome, QAnon, Pizzagate territory than any line Caviezel has or any shot. The majority of people who watched it to see what wasn't in it. The other people in the audience watched it as a form of ethical consumerism. The idea that buying a ticket and watching a film was somehow saving kids or making the world a better place by financing other films that seek to propagate themselves without ever providing any actual substance. Ethical consumerism is a major selling strategy in Hollywood these days. Lots of films succeed as a form of virtue signal validation. Films that reinforce political or social stances on either side of the spectrum, offering little past the regurgitation of the most basic tenets of the platforms. It's like paying to willingly brainwash yourself. It's crowdsourcing propaganda. I saw God is a Bullet by chance. I happened across the synopsis and decided to roll the dice on it, never having seen a trailer. I haven't met anybody who's seen it. I haven't met anybody who wanted to. Never heard of the book it was based on. I got something out of it. More than just the 2.5 hours it killed. When the lights go down in the theater, are people now just waiting for them to come back up so they can log a film on their Letterboxd, write a stupid pun review about it, talk to their date about it, or are people really engaging with the art for the value that's inherent in doing so? Are people still watching movies for their internal selves and not just their external personalities? The ticket I bought for God is a Bullet was sold to me solely on that basis. There was no promise my $18 was saving the world or would serve as a receipt that I had the right opinions or was a good person. Isn't that more substantive, more worthwhile, more authentic? And you know what? It was perfectly serviceable, grindhouse-esque sleaze. Why did I buy the ticket? Because I'm a sleaze bucket who likes sleaze.